This is the latest video from Right to Remain about the UK asylum and immigration process, and the latest video is about the asylum substantive interview. This is the big interview, sometimes people just call it the big asylum interview, and it will generally be the second interview that people will have after claiming asylum. The first interview being the shorter screening interview, where you're asked more basic information. The asylum substantive interview is when the Home Office interviewer will ask you in detail about your reasons for claiming asylum, about why you can't go back to your country, why you need to stay in the UK. The interview might last several hours. Lots of people's last 4 hours, 6 hours. Some people, their interview will even take place over 2 days. You'll be asked lots of questions, and you might be asked the same question several times in different ways throughout the different hours of the interview. This interview can be long, difficult and traumatic. You're talking about things that are not going to be happy things. You'll be talking about maybe things that have happened to you, family members, people you know, or things that you fear could happen to you. It can be the most important part of your asylum application. Lots of people don't have documentary evidence, don't have papers, don't have evidence of that kind to prove their case. And so at this point, your testimony, your story, is your evidence. So therefore, you need to be very clear when you give your information. You need to give as much detail as you can, but without guessing if you can't remember things. And try to remember to include all the important information. It'll be difficult to know what is important information if you haven't sat down beforehand and thought through what it is you need to get across to the Home Office, and preferably do this with a friend or volunteer who can sit with you and listen to you and help you to figure out what it is you're trying to tell the Home Office. As always, we recommend that you have a look at all the resources we've got and the Right to Remain Toolkit. Because the asylum substantive interview is such an important part of the asylum process, we've got lots of resources about this stage of the process. And if you have a look at the asylum interview section of the toolkit, you'll see we've got lots of information in English, and we've also got summaries of the information translated into 8 other languages apart from English. And we've also got these great animation videos that we made with Refugee Infobus, and they're available in 9 languages. Also on the toolkit section, you'll find links to the amazing zine, a kind of rough guide for preparing for the asylum interview, which was designed and made by Rosie from Early Asylum Support in Sheffield. And this zine has got these really beautiful pictures and helpful, accessible way of exploring the information that's in the toolkit. At the time of recording this, we've run out of the print copies, but you can find the PDF to read through on the website. Because this interview is so important, and because you're going to be asked lots of questions, maybe confusing questions about subject matter that could be really upsetting for you, we really do think this is one of the most important stages to prepare for in advance. You don't want the Home Office interviewer to be the first person that you're telling your story to. They're not your friend. They're not there to be your friend. So we recommend that you think beforehand, practice beforehand, maybe even do a mock practice interview beforehand with somebody pretending to be the Home Office interviewer, just so you can get what you want to say straight in your head. This is definitely not about people telling you what you should say in the interview. That's not a good idea. That's not what we want. But this is a really important opportunity to tell your story, and nobody can tell what they need to tell off the top of their head with no preparation, especially when you might be talking about things that have happened over many years, that may be quite complicated, that might involve lots of different people that you'll need to explain. You can't assume that the Home Office interviewer will understand the situation in your country or in your particular situation. So actually it can be quite helpful to practice what you want to say with somebody who's not from your country, so that they can point out things that won't necessarily make sense to somebody who's not from your country, so that you're able to explain it more in the interview. You can't assume that the interviewer will say, "I don't understand that, please explain." You might just find that you get a refusal letter that refuses you on the basis that what you said didn't make sense or doesn't sound true, when if you'd been given the opportunity, you could actually have made it make sense, explained it more to somebody who knows nothing about your country. If you're not wanting to do a full practice mock interview, you might just want to sit and write a timeline of the events that took place to get them straight in your head, because often you'll need to present your information in a chronological way, so that X happened at this point and then Y happened after that. But you also may be asked questions that jump around within that timeline in the interview. So if you've got it really clear in your head, you'll be less confused by the interviewer maybe jumping back to something you said before about 5 years ago and then forward again to something that happened fairly recently. If you don't like using words, you could maybe draw pictures for your timeline, and that can often help people to remember. So it's really important to prepare for the interview, but obviously you don't want to sound like you've rehearsed, like you've polished some kind of speech that you're just presenting that you've memorised, because to the Home Office that might sound like you're not telling the truth, even though preparing and being ready for this interview is obviously a really responsible and sensible thing to do. There's some really practical things you can think about so that you're not worrying about them on the day. Making sure you know where your interview will be. The letter that invites you to the interview will tell you where the interview will be, but maybe you want to go and visit the location beforehand, maybe with a friend or supporter, so that you have an image of what the place looks like in advance. That can help if you get anxious about unknown places. Make sure you know how you're going to get there so that you're not late on the day. Some organisations offer transport to interviews, and if you're on asylum support, you should be able to get your travel ticket paid for you. If you need a female or male interpreter and or interviewer, you can have this, and you just need to make sure you've asked for this in advance. Also, if you are a single parent of a child under 5 years old, you should be able to ask for childcare to be provided so you don't have to have your child with you in the interview. It used to be really important to make sure you requested that the interview was audio recorded, and you used to have to do this more than 24 hours in advance of the interview in writing. Audio recording the interview is really, really important because if the interview is not in English, you'll be having an interpreter. And if there are things that the Home Office said that you said that are then used against you in the refusal letter, if they refuse your claim, and you think you didn't say them, you think there was a misunderstanding or it's been written down wrong what you said, the only way you can prove what you actually said in your own language will be if there's some kind of audio recording of the interview. It's now Home Office policy to automatically record the asylum substantive interviews, where they have new interview rooms with that technology. But you might just want to check in advance because the Home Office website still does have information saying that you need to request this in advance. So maybe not every interview location will have caught up with this new policy. Some people are having their asylum substantive interviews done via video call, via Skype. In this case, you will get a digital recording of the interview, but this will usually be sent straight to your lawyer, not to you. If there are reasons why an interview by video, by Skype, would not be appropriate, maybe because you have communication difficulties, then your lawyer should speak to the Home Office to request that it's done in person instead. During the interview, you've got the right to ask for breaks when you need them. Remember, you may be talking about things that you find upsetting, so a break might be really important, a break whenever you need it, just to kind of gather yourself and get calm and try and remember more clearly, and to look after yourself. And take your time. The Home Office interviewer might pressure you to try and answer questions quickly, but this is a really important interview and it's your story, so take your time in getting your story right. If you think there's a problem with interpretation during the interview, it's really important to try and say so as soon as possible. And obviously this can be really tricky if you don't speak any English because you'll be trying to communicate this through the interpreter. But it's far more powerful if it is noted on the interview record by the interviewer that there was a problem with the interpretation. The questions you'll be asked during your interview will depend very much on you, on your asylum claim, but there are some general areas that people will be asked about, and we've got a lot more information about this on the Toolkit section about the asylum interview. So it'd be a really good idea before you have an interview or before someone you know has an interview to have a look at the kinds of questions you might be expecting. So there'll be some questions about you, about your date of birth and about your nationality. There'll be questions about your journey to the UK. And then, of course, there'll be questions about why you're claiming asylum, what you are in danger of if you were to be returned to your country, who is responsible for the risk that you feel you're facing, has things happened to your family members, to people you know, if you've got family members that you've left in your country, why was it safe for them to stay? Or if it wasn't, how were you able to leave and they were not? But there's a lot more information about this in the Toolkit section. After the interview, we recommend that you spend some time with friends or family, try and do something nice to relax a little bit because it will have been a difficult experience. And then as soon as possible, it will be important to try and meet with your lawyer. If you can, if you have the ability to read English or you know someone who can help you, you should go through the written transcript. So that's the written version of what you said. It should be word for word of what you said in the interview, and you should be handed this document when you leave the interview. You should look through that and see if this is actually what you said or what you meant to say, and then write a list of anything that you think is wrong, that has been wrongly recorded, that has been misunderstood, or that you got wrong, because everyone gets things wrong in these circumstances. You can't say everything perfectly. And then you'll want to take that list with you to your lawyer, and you'll probably want to submit a statement to the Home Office, usually within about 5 days after the interview, further explaining points maybe you didn't get a chance to talk about properly in the interview, or correcting things that you need to correct. The decision will be based on your individual circumstances. Obviously, there's certain countries that are more likely to be granted refugee status or humanitarian protection, but the reality is that actually most people are refused by the Home Office, and that they can then go on to appeal a refusal in court, in the first tier tribunal. So it's important to be prepared for a negative decision, and you might have many months to prepare and start getting yourself ready for the next stages. So it's not the end when you receive a refusal from the Home Office. People receive a long and very difficult refusal letter that can feel very upsetting, and this is a really important time to have friends and community around you who can help you to deal with that emotionally, but also then take the next steps to challenge that decision and try and get the right decision in your case. And we've got lots more information about what you can do if you've been refused by the Home Office in the Right to Remain toolkit, so don't give up.